who will be the next BAL champion.
Hello, I'm Esther Gitu Ewart. It's Thursday, May 18th. This is Africa 54. Clashes between farmers and herders in Nigeria's Plateau State kill more than 80 people as heavily armed gangs continue attacking villages. The United Nations Refugee Agency says the number of people who fled from Sudan to Chad has doubled to 60,000 in the last week alone, many of them women and children. We'll have a report from a camp in Borota, Chad. And in part 4 of our Killer Fentanyl series, we'll explore how stigma about fentanyl abuse complicates treatment for addicts. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. We begin our broadcast in West Africa, where more than 80 people are dead following clashes between herders and farmers in central Nigeria's Plateau State, according to state officials. VOA's Paul Ndiho has the details.
Gunfire during clashes between herders and farmers in the Mangu district in central Nigeria's Plateau State has left at least 80 people dead. The region is located on the dividing line between Nigeria's predominantly Muslim north and mainly Christian south. This area has struggled for years with ethnic and religious violence. The SAT says clashes erupted on Monday between herders who are primarily Muslim, and farmers who are mostly Christians.
Yesterday, there was a serious attack, even on our way going there to see all that was happening. In fact, we were trying to reach to Kubat, where they killed 30 people. In fact, the Fulanis raised ambush on us. We had to scrolling on the ground under the flying bullets, and God in his own way, we were all safe.
The violence in northwest and central Nigeria is spurring from retaliation killings into border criminality, with heavy armed gangs attacking villages. The SAT says the gangs are ruthless.
Every houses were set ablaze, and all their grains were all burned. Houses were burned, properties were destroyed. There was looting. We saw them. We even saw the machineries, the attackers.
In a different incident, at least 4 Nigerians are dead following an attack on a convoy of 2 U.S. government vehicles. On Tuesday, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken says the attack did not appear targeted at the U.S. mission there. However, Blinken is condemning the attack and says U.S. officials are working closely with Nigerian law enforcement to bring those responsible to justice. The convoy was carrying 5 employees of the U.S. mission to Nigeria and 4 members of the Nigerian police force. U.S. National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby says no U.S. citizens were involved. Separatists who operate in the region have escalated their attacks in recent years, usually targeting police or government buildings. President-elect Bola Tinubu, who will take the helm of Africa's most populous nation later this month, faces multiple security challenges. Primarily, the military is battling a 14-year-old jihadist insurgency in northeast, separatists' tensions in southeast, and kidnappings by criminals across the country. Violence has risen in the last few weeks after a brief calm period during the February and March presidential and gubernatorial elections. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
For more on the clashes in central Nigeria's Plateau State, I'm joined live via Skype from Abuja by VOA Hausa reporter Al-Hassan Bala. Al-Hassan, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Esther.
Give us an update on the latest in Plateau State.
As at this morning, that is Thursday morning, what is happening in Plateau, the number of communities being attacked has risen from 3 to around 8 villages, which the number of persons that were killed during these attacks has risen from 35, 50 to now around 100, although there are a lot of conflicting figures because the national president of a community association here, there in Mangu, Plateau State, has said that about 85% are confirmed killed, while a member of a lawmaker who is representing that local government and Bakos said that over 100 persons are the ones that were killed during this attack in these 8 communities in Mangu local government of Plateau State. So when it has to do with these figures right now, and the authorities, like the police, are yet to actually give the exact figure of number of persons that were killed in these attacks.
So we understand there's kidnappings, there's so much chaos going on there. How have authorities secured the area? Are there any measures to make sure that, citizens are safe?
Immediately after the attack, the governor of the state, Lalong, declared curfew in that local government and on those communities. Then the operation Safe Haven, which is majorly a combine of police and the military forces, actually has said that they have already deployed number of officers or personnel rather to go there and de-escalate this issue that is happening in those communities. Although there are a lot of complaints by those residing in that communities that they were yet to, as at yesterday, they are yet to see any commitment from the security forces when it comes to do the issue of these attacks, or stopping it or preventing it from further escalating, because it is a farming community, and there is a long age crisis between farmers and herders in those communities. It was never a religious issue, so it is like kind of between herders and farmers, which has been reprisal attack between them.
So, Bala, do we have an update on the U.S. convoy attack, and do we know where the whereabouts of the 3 abductees?
Yes, of course. Initially, the figure given were 4 people that had been killed, but just some few hours ago, or a few minutes ago, the police commissioner in Anambra State, Commissioner of Police Echang said that 7 people confirmed killed during that attack. 4 are the police escort, and then 3 are the U.S. consulate staff, who are mostly local staff. They are not U.S. citizens. And also arrest has already been made. 2 persons have already been arrested in connection with that attack, and also the kidnapping or abduction of other staff of the U.S. consulate that were in Anambra State, which the police say that in conjunction with the Navy, the Army, and other security forces, they are already trying their best to ensure that they trace or locate those that are being kidnapped in that state, so that they can return them back.
Hopefully, we will get them back. Thank you so much, Al-Hassan. Al-Hassan Bala, VOA reporter for us there in Abuja, Nigeria. In Sudan, airstrikes pounded southern areas of Khartoum Thursday as clashes flared near a military camp. Fighting in Sudan has displaced nearly 1 million people and left residents of the capital city struggling to survive. Airstrikes by the army targeting the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces targeted several residential neighborhoods in southern Khartoum, including near the Taiba camp, where witnesses say a police reserve force aligned with the army battled the RSF on the ground. The army has primarily used air power and heavy artillery as it tries to drive back the RSF, which is spread out across large areas of Khartoum and the nearby cities of Bahri and Omdurman across the Nile River. The United Nations Refugee Agency says the number of people who have fled from Sudan to Chad has doubled to 60,000 in the last week, and many are women and children. Henry Wilkins spoke to Sudanese refugees who just arrived at a newly created camp in Barota, Chad.
Aid groups are struggling to help 25,000 refugees who arrived in Chad from Sudan last week. The recent influx has almost doubled the number of Sudanese refugees in the country since the Sudan civil war began April 15th. To reach the site of a camp housing the new arrivals, VOA flew from the capital, N'Djamena, and then drove 4 hours to the remote town of Barota on the Chad-Sudan border. Here, a settlement that didn't exist a week ago is now the size of a town. The refugees have come from Western Darfur, which has been ravaged by lawlessness and intercommunal violence, mostly consisting of ethnically Arab armed groups terrorizing black Sudanese. Sudan's conflict triggered the spate of violence. Refugee Khadija Arbeb Abdulrahman told VOA how it is she arrived at Barota.
We're coming from Congo because of the fighting. There are a lot of terrorists there. That's why so many refugees have fled here. This is all I brought with me. We don't have anything else. We're here for food and security.
Meanwhile, Isaac Bakar says he has been living in Barota since last week. He describes seeing a group of armed men raiding his hometown of Congo before he fled.
They were just breaking into people's houses to steal money, and if you didn't have any money, they forced you out of your home and sent you south, or they killed you. I saw them killing people. If I had owned a phone, I would have recorded it.
The mayor of Barota, Toko Bahat, says he is happy to welcome the refugees as his guests and points out his community has strong ties with those across the border, but resources are strained.
People need a lot of help here with food and especially water. Because of no rain, there is a scarcity of water. There are kids who need help and refugees who have no job.
UNHCR is putting basic sanitation in place and bringing water, but warns there is still much to do.
The need is great, and our support is minimized because of funding shortfall. We really calling for international community to support and continue to support to those new arrivals.
Chad's rainy season starts this month. The deep gullies on the road to Barota will fill with water, making access for aid groups more difficult. Henry Wilkins for VOA News, Barota, Chad.
The United States is urging an investigation by Mali's transitional government into the likely execution of hundreds of villagers. It blames elements of the Malian armed forces in cooperation with the Russian private military contractor Wagner Group. In a recent interview, VOA Pentagon correspondent Carla Bob asked the NATO Deputy Secretary General if the Wagner Group should be considered a terrorist group.
We're not in the business of classifying international organizations. We know that this is a very corrosive, destabilizing, aggressive set of paramilitaries that are basically the hand of the Russian state. And we have to fight back, and we have to make sure that we help the countries, especially in Africa, that are becoming so vulnerable that in a way they reach out to Wagner Group as a sort of a desperate solution, or because some leaders want to have their own personal protection guaranteed by Wagner. We are discussing this when it comes to what we call the global south, when we discuss about Africa. It's not about how to characterize, that's other organizations, it's American government that has this kind of classification that has consequences. But for us, we look to the strategic reality that we have to win the war together with Ukraine, in Ukraine, because this is the way in which all order would be shaped. It's not only about Ukraine. It's not even about Europe. It's about the lessons learned that others will draw from the way in which we were helping and to what level of success an aggressed country in Europe, and then which will be the ramifications of this conclusion.
That was NATO Deputy Secretary General Mircea Joana speaking to VOA Pentagon correspondent Carla Bob. U.S. President Joe Biden is in Japan for the G7 Summit of Leaders. The meetings are focusing on countering what they have billed as China's economic coercion, growing assertiveness and military buildup, as well as supporting Ukraine in its battle against a Russian invasion. Shortly after landing, Biden greeted about 400 U.S. and Japanese troops before heading to Hiroshima for a bilateral meeting with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54, and still to come, we'll explore how stigma about fentanyl abuse complicates treatment for addicts. Stay with us.
From around the world. Let's go.
Kigali, we are here for the BAL Finals. For the best of African basketball. The Sahara and Nile Conference delivered their verdict. The top 8 teams on the continent are chasing the Holy Grail. Who will be the next BAL champion? It's game time.
In other news, Tunisian President Kais Saied has hosted Jewish, Muslim and Christian leaders following a deadly mass shooting on May 9th outside the Griba synagogue. President Saied told the leaders Tunisia was a country of tolerance and coexistence. The attack on the resort island of Djerba killed 5 people. Frankfurt, a South African farming town, is angry after losing a legal fight with state-owned power utility Eskom forced its solar plant to dump desperately needed electricity, leaving the town in the dark. Frankfurt started using solar energy in February to lessen the impact of crippling power cuts that can last up to 12 hours a day. In Malawian, authorities on Thursday arrested more than 400 refugees and asylum seekers in Lilongwe who had refused to return to a camp outside the city. The crackdown comes about 2 months after the government issued an ultimatum for people to return to Zaleka, an overcrowded camp about 40 kilometers north of the city. A native of Rwanda, Jean Didio Mukunzi, founded Ebenezer Healthcare Access, a non-profit, to assist immigrants with access to health care in the United States of Ohio. Mukunzi is hoping to lift language barriers for culture faced by new arrivals to the country. Tim Ishimwe has the story.
Jean Didio Mukunzi's inspiration comes from personal experience. Mukunzi fled his home country Rwanda following the 1994 genocide, and after spending several years in neighboring countries, he later immigrated to the U.S. in 2008. He then completed his education in public health in 2011. But initially, he struggled to communicate in English and wasn't able to access healthcare. Today, he speaks multiple languages and has decided to give back. He has founded Ebenezer Healthcare Access in 2019, a non-profit to help immigrants who might find themselves in his shoes.
In order to be able to help these immigrants, you need to know their culture. So we train healthcare providers, nurses, social workers, medical providers about the culture of the people that they are seeing. so that the care might be successful.
Mukunzi's organization partners with 29 hospitals in the region and the academic institutions such as the University of Dayton and the Wright State University. The city has embraced immigrants, city officials say, and in the effort to do a better job of welcoming people to the city, Matt Joseph, Dayton City Commissioner, says continued outreach and engagement is part of the process.
We put together a team, a committee of people from all different places around the city. We meet, we hold events to welcome people, but we do everything we can to make sure that people have a chance to live their lives, to make sure their kids are a success, to make sure they can do something using their talents and abilities, and really to help build the city.
To help immigrants get settled and begin to become independent, Welcome Dayton, the city's community initiative, has a variety of resources available.
We work really closely with a lot of different organizations, including educational, legal, health-related, culture and arts, to provide people with some of the needs that they may have. We also make sure that we have materials translated in different languages.
Mucheshimane Ruvamwabu, a Congolese refugee and a mother of 4 children, says she's no longer waiting until she's seriously ill to see a doctor. Ebenezer Healthcare Access facilitates her transportation to and from the 5 Rivers Health Clinic, a cost-effective community clinic, and provides a translator for her.
I do not go to the hospital when I'm terribly sick. They schedule our appointment and they will inform us when to go. And then you go there and you get some medical treatment. You will be given medication even though you are not very sick. You will not just go to the hospital on your own for medical treatment. They will plan that for you.
In order to make it easier for immigrants to get the right treatment, regardless of the language, Ebenezer has set up a hotline where they can call and be answered by people who speak Kinyarwanda, Kirundi, Swahili, and other foreign languages. Tim Harris Shima for VOA News, Dayton, Ohio.
The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says America's leading cause of overdose deaths is synthetic opioids, mostly fentanyl, which can be up to 50 times stronger than heroin. U.S. law enforcement says illicit fentanyl is cheaply made from chemicals mostly coming from China, trafficked through Mexico, and smuggled into the United States. VOA's Natasha Mosgovaya looks at fentanyl in Washington state and explores how stigmas about fentanyl abuse complicate treatment for addicts.
Lupe Hurtado learned about the social isolation of drug addiction when it drove her to homelessness.
There's a lot of stigma. People would, tell us, oh, get a job, or yell things at us, throw things at us. A common thing is like people driving around the encampments and just laying on their horn.
Hurtado now works as a peer counselor with a local addiction assistance group. She says the social dislocation and shame fentanyl addicts sometimes feel makes them less likely to seek treatment.
Stigma in some ways equals death for some people. Overdose, especially with fentanyl.
Fentanyl addicts, especially those who are homeless, can be difficult for a community to embrace. Photographer Melissa Wax recalls addicts living in a park across the street from her home.
People were dying in the park. I saw people being drug out in body bags and just in fires and explosions and drug abuse and fights. And as a parent with 2 kids that walked to school right through here too, it was like terrifying.
Public health advisor Brad Finegood says breaking stigmas around fentanyl addiction is critical to treatment, especially considering that trauma often contributes to drug abuse.
If what we're doing re-traumatizes people, causes people more pain, then we're going to be in this cycle of not being able to heal as a community and not being able to work with the people who are struggling to heal.
Community health worker Dr. Joe is a former addict. He says the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, but reconnecting.
Nobody succeeds in anything without a human connection. So these people at a bare minimum deserve a human connection.
The fatal impact of not getting treatment for fentanyl addiction can be seen on a wall at the Tacoma Needle Exchange, where pictures and mementos remember those lost to overdose.
We don't know how long fentanyl is going to be around. We don't know what the next drug is going to be, and we don't know what the next drug after that is going to be. Things come in waves, and they affect people differently.
The demand for clean needles was replaced by growing demand for opioid reversal kits. Working to reduce fentanyl overdoses, the Needle Exchange program is installing naloxone boxes next to first aid kits in Tacoma public institutions. Natasha Mozgovaya, VOA News, Tacoma, Washington.
In our final series on Fentanyl Friday, VOA looks at how some addicts quit the opioid. The world's biggest chocolate producers are enjoying record profits but are failing to pass on the benefits to cocoa farmers, many of whom are deeply suffering, according to a report from the charity Oxfam. Henry Ridgwell has more.
Ghana is the world's second largest producer of cocoa. Farmers' incomes in the country fell 16% on average since the start of the coronavirus pandemic in 2020, according to Oxfam's analysis.
COVID, of course, was a big disruption, but then also the war in Ukraine and the resulting economic crisis, coupled with some more longer-term challenges, like the impact of climate change and aging farms, which is a big issue in Ghana.
Oxfam says many Ghanaian cocoa farmers survive on just $2 a day.
Lower incomes really have shown to facilitate the use of children on farms, so child labor, which is a big problem, of course, in Ghana and other cocoa-producing countries, but also deforestation, that farmers are more likely to go out and cut down more trees in order to expand their farms, in order to make a living.
At the same time, Oxfam says profits for the world's biggest chocolate firms, Hershey, Lindt & Sprüngli, Mondelez and Nestle, have increased by 16% since the pandemic.
And that translates into 15 billion of profit by just the four largest public chocolate companies since 2020.
Ivory Coast is the world's biggest producer of cocoa. Here too, farmers complain of falling incomes.
We planters are poor. The Westerners who come to buy cocoa are getting rich. Meanwhile, we are suffering. We earn nothing. We suffer cultivating the fields. That's why we ask the government to help us.
The governments of Ghana and Ivory Coast signed a deal in 2021 to try to get a bigger share of the chocolate industry's profits by setting a minimum price and obtaining a cash premium per ton of cocoa, which is an extra sum paid directly to farmers on top of the commercial price of cocoa. But Oxfam says the payments have failed to meaningfully increase farmers' incomes.
If you as a company are profitable at the same time as the producers of your most critical raw material are falling deeper into poverty, then there's something wrong with your business model.
Lindt & Sprüngli told VOA they pay Ghanaian farmers a $60 per ton premium and invested over $20 million in cocoa sustainability programs in 2021. Hershey said it aims to support better livelihoods for farmers with cash transfers and loans. Mondelez and Nestle did not respond to VOA requests for comment. Henry Ridgwell for VOA News, London.
Join us again